We are live again at 4 o'clock. Matt has been busy trading all day, and here I am. We're going to talk about China Model Y numbers and how the Model Y is sold out. Mr. Optimus goes to Washington. Talk about Figures Robot, Kathy Wood's $8 trillion valuation for Tesla, and CNN and the media continues to blame Tesla's sales drop on Elon's political activities, something that we warned about over a month ago, as like common sense would dictate that this was going to happen.
We were saying, like, you can write the headlines today, no matter how good or bad
Yeah.
the actual numbers are, the headline's going to be the same.
Yeah, basic common sense. And maybe talk a little bit about California and some fun new website. So let's first talk about the CNN story. Tesla sales dropped year over year for the first quarter. We had the Model Y changeover, which restricted supply. It's looking like, according to Troy Teslike, that the number might be below 350,000. What do you think about that, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we were first looking at this a couple months ago, we were thinking 380 or something, which at the time was almost 100,000 units lower than where the consensus was. So it's not surprising me that we might end up a little bit lower than that. I've been doing some thinking, and I'm not going to claim to be as accurate or into the weeds as Troy is, but I think one of the things that is actually going to potentially help the delivery numbers this quarter is that they're literally selling every last vehicle of the old Model Y that they've got in inventory. So you mentioned earlier Model Y is sold out in 33 states right now. I was actually watching this last week, and there was a fair amount of inventory in my market, and I was checking Chicago on a pretty regular basis, and Beverly Hills also. I was just like 3 different states to kind of spot check, and it seemed like, okay, they would take some off, but then they would replenish the numbers, and so I was like, I don't even know if they'll actually get through all the inventory that they have. Now it seems they're basically through it all. There's a few states where there are still a few, but I think those 3 zip codes that I was looking at earlier are completely sold out within 200 miles. So I think that's going to be a positive boost to the deliveries. I think you might want to put your phone on silent. So, I don't know where the actual number is going to end up. My guess would be we do something closer to 370, but I don't know, maybe that's just wishful thinking because I haven't done the full detailed bottoms up analysis and, looking at it plant by plant and, working it in a couple different ways. What I have done is tried to make an estimate of how many of the old Model Ys were sold, plus how many were in inventory and kind of, getting those all worked out. And then if you make an assumption about, maybe 2 weeks of production of the new Model Ys won't get delivered, what does that do? And when I'm looking at it that way, I think 360, 370 seems very doable. But I don't know. We'll see. Troy's the expert here. I'm not going to try to say that I've got a better view on this than he does.
Also, Tesla stock, and we'll come back to the other topics. Tesla stock had a huge jump yesterday. It continues to march today. Some amateur analysts were proclaiming that it was a short squeeze yesterday, but according to S3 Partners, essentially short interest declined from 71 million shares to 70 million shares. So only 1 million shares were bought back. This is actually a very small move in the short interest over the past 30 days. It's one of the smaller moves. It's probably the smallest of the top 5 smallest moves in short interest. So yesterday was not driven by short covering in meaningful numbers.
In Bradford, so I haven't been looking at this as closely, but short interest right now is single-digit percentage, right, of the float?
Yeah.
So, like, anytime I hear people talking about a short squeeze, I'm like, you just are not paying attention, I think, to what what's actually going on. Like, there was this whole. I think it's a good narrative, and it probably fits people's priors because you saw like with the whole Tim Walz thing, and then all these people saying like, "Oh, short Tesla to make money and to put pressure on Elon," and then there was that whole, to buy the $100 put to take money from Elon, and so I think people loved the idea that like this was happening, and all these like idiots were gonna go short and then have to sell and cause a short squeeze. But if you look at the actual numbers, like calling for a short squeeze just didn't make any sense. And I didn't even see who was saying that, but somebody else asked me about it recently. And I was like, that with the single digit percentage of short interest, like that's not the type of setup that we had like in 2019 with the gamma squeeze plus all the short squeeze. And it was like this really crazy setup. Tesla just doesn't have that anymore, which is fine. It doesn't need those fireworks.
It did increase from a small number in early February by about 20%. But it's still, according to S3 Partners, less than 2.5%. So let's talk about them.
Did you know that Tesla could go up though? Because after the last couple months, it seemed like a distant memory that was a thing.
We were kind of waiting for this. So this is a couple months in the making, waiting for sentiment to culminate on the negative side. I don't know if the bottom is behind us. It seems like it may be a little bit hard for it to go below 220 a share, even if like we get a recession or whatever, or if there's a bad reaction to like if tariffs go in place on April 2nd or whatever. But we'll see what happens from here. Let's talk about China Model Y numbers. The China domestic sales have been steadily increasing, hitting over 17,000 over the last week. The record that they hit in previous weeks was around 22,000, but that was only a couple weeks last year. So they're starting
Jordan,
to
can you put that graphic up that I think you had? There we go.
It's good to cover our faces. So
that's just mercy to all the viewers to not see our faces, but it does help like a lot. So I don't follow all the weekly numbers and everything as closely as usual. So for me, it's helpful to kind of see, okay, where was the drawdown, when the lines came down, and then you can see now, all right, we're back up to the 13,800 in March, then 15,300, now at 17,400. So it's pretty clear to see how the ramp of the new Model Ys are really taking off, and so this is a really helpful information that Tesla Chan puts out there. So definitely follow Monex if you're not doing that already.
For them to get back to full production, you'd be hoping for at least 22,000 per week in production. What these charts were showing was the domestic sales to China, not counting any exports. So Tesla in China can do about 88,000 per month. So hopefully they could do about 22,000 a week if they're not exporting any. So let's talk a little bit about in Europe, sales are down 50%. So it seems like the places that are laying a bit of an egg in comparison to China are Europe and the US. So the Chinese factory, brought their production down. They come back much faster. And in the US and Europe, it's a slower, more gradual trek.
Do we know that it's actually slower though? Because I was thinking about this. I know the Shanghai plant came down first, right? And it would have resumed production first. I think was it like a 1 or 2 week lag? I think with the rest of the plants, or is my memory just off there?
Yeah, it might have been 9 days or something like that. I'm forgetting slightly. But like the year over year numbers are just much worse for Europe.
Yeah.
Now, Europe sales did have the benefit last year of exports from China. So this was before. So go back to January, February of 2024. This was before Europe changed the tariffs and added additional tariffs on top of the value added tax on cars exported from China. So when that happened, essentially Tesla had to sell a lot of their production to China and to Asiana. So that's a big difference between last year and this year.
Yeah, but I mean, that level of nuance doesn't work at CNN. So let's talk about how Elon Musk is a Nazi and how he's tanking the company. I saw this one thread. I wish it would have, or a headline. I wish I would have taken a screenshot of it. It was something about how like Elon is desperately trying to save his like failing company, but it's only hanging on by a thread. And I was just like just from reading the headline, you would have assumed that Tesla was like on the verge of bankruptcy, not sitting on $30 billion in cash and with the most popular car in the world. So it's just like these legacy media companies that just push like known false narratives because they don't like somebody. They can't die fast enough in my mind. I mean, I'm just so glad that the eyeballs are being lost and people are like actually thinking for themselves or listening to podcasts and finding out a little bit more information from firsthand. Because like this is just it's almost a joke how like we were making a parody of like the crazy headlines that they were going to write, and then sure enough, like a month and a half later, that's exactly what we see. And I'm sure it's going to be on overdrive next week when we get the actual production and delivery numbers for Tesla for Q1. They're going to be lower than last year. They're going to be lower than Q4 by a lot. So whatever negative thing you want to say about Elon, you can just tie it into the fact that number lower and, Elon man bad and Orange man bad. And like, it's just like, it's so simple to write this, but it's really sad that anyone would listen to that.
And the headline is also going to be, and the stories are already coming out where they're saying, despite Trump featuring Tesla in front of the White House and all these conservative commentators buying Teslas and promoting them, sales are still down. They'll also say that. Yeah. So that's going to come, and more of that is going to come. It's just common sense. So you should expect it to happen. So this takes me back, though, to how I got red pill or whatnot into initially buying Tesla stock for our clients. So in 2019, I watched the Joe Rogan podcast with Elon. But like going back to 2018, Elon had the 420 tweet, and I knew at the time that Elon was half trolling and half telling the truth. And I had a pretty negative opinion about Tesla because I believed everything that Zero Hedge wrote about Tesla, that they were like smuggling drugs through the Gigafactory in Nevada. And
I actually did a valuation of Tesla's drug smuggling business back then for an April Fool's joke. It was like
that was a good one.
Yeah, it was kilos per mile. That's the key metric for Tesla's.
I didn't quite believe that one, but like, allegedly they had poor controls at Gigafactory Nevada and stuff like that. And then when he went on Joe Rogan, I think it's really important to go to the source with any controversial figure and actually watch full speeches, watch long form interviews if they do them. Mm-hmm. And I saw how thoughtful Elon was. He thought about each question. And he's come up with some more standard answers now, but he thought about each question. You could see how thoughtful he was. And but then he smoked pot on the interview, which was legal in California. But the response, and this is from that Harvard Business School guy, Jeffrey, I don't know if it's Rosenberg or, but he's like, no Fortune 500 CEO should ever smoke pot, even after the after business hours or whatever. And I could just tell that the media was being really unfair to Elon. So that actually caused me to dig in harder.
Hmm.
And I wonder if that's going to happen with a lot of people now who see people don't favor vandalism. They don't favor this domestic terrorism. You're making people like scared to own Teslas, right?
Yeah.
By like keying them and firebombing, etc., and or like shooting bullets through Tesla dealerships. Like
Yeah, even this morning there were multiple bombs found in dealership in Austin, I think it
yeah.
was, or somewhere in Texas.
So
Like,
people will see how unfairly treated Elon and Tesla are being treated, and even Elon, like some people don't like his style. His favorability might not even be the greatest among like moderates or independents, but most people don't favor government waste. Um, and maybe people don't like change, so they don't like the way Elon's going about it. But
yeah.
they can see how unfairly he's being treated with that. So I think it's going to cause people to dig in and look into buying the stock or the car. Matt, you and I have talked to a lot of people and who are Teslanaires, and sometimes the stock came first, and sometimes they bought the car first, but usually they end up buying both, right?
Hmm. Yep. It's a pretty common phenomenon. Yeah. So I do think, I mean, we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago too, about just how um, low information there is for the majority of the population about like how amazing the car ownership experience is. And for the last couple of years, it's easy to kind of forget about that because it's like, oh, Robotaxis and Optimus and like all these things that are going to like be really good kind of upside call options essentially
Yeah.
on the stock, on the valuation. But like it was still obvious just from having anecdotal conversations with anybody that like they didn't understand anything about what it was like to actually own a Tesla. They might have some irrational fear of charging or going on a long trip or something like that, or just like fears that the car is going to like spontaneously blow up or that the battery is going to die and you're going to have to replace the whole thing. But like I'm starting to see all these posts from people who just weren't interested before, and they're like, "Oh, it's like actually really great acceleration, and I didn't know that." And I'm like, like, how
Mm,
did you not know that? But there's just so many things that I won't repeat all of them now because I know our whole audience knows like how great the car ownership experience of having a
yeah.
Tesla is. But it's like so many of the people who are not in this bubble that we're in just don't know the very basics about it. And as they are starting to open their eyes, it's like that's going to help sales a lot, I think. And if it's like the sort of thing that was happening back in 2017, 2018, like the more people who buy a Tesla, the more people who buy a Tesla because they show their neighbors, they show their friends. You talked about how we had this chasm where like the early adopters all told their friends. But then, there wasn't like the normal middle class people. They weren't for the most part interested in it. And I think now we've got that. It seems like we've got this beachhead in that, the early majority, I guess it would be now, where like they're actually starting to get really excited about it. And so
Yeah.
that's I think extremely exciting because we've had softer demand than I would have expected for a very long time, just based on how good the product is. And I'm hopeful. I'm not going to bake it into my model right now, but I'm hopeful that we could actually get back to some sort of a scenario where there actually is more demand than supply sometime soon.
So Matt, there's also a little drama about covered calls. How you feeling about your covered calls this week?
Awesome. I didn't know there was drama about covered calls. I guess there's always drama about covered calls. People think you're like getting too cute about it or whatever. Um, I've got to be careful what I say because we're in the middle of some stuff for clients. So
Mhm.
we had a deviation from our normal strategy for just kind of technical reasons this week. But for those clients that we did sell covered calls for, yeah, it was a great week to be doing it. Yeah, it's
Yeah, people look at like the big move Tesla made, and like we didn't do it first thing on Monday morning. We knew it'd be a big day for Tesla. I even tweeted about it being a big day
You
in the
posted
morning.
about it. Come on.
I posted, and yeah, I posted the video that the Simon Pollock in Scandinavia, where he does the Tesla light shows,
Mhm.
and he did a light show to the song called "Blah Blah Blah," and it's about the haters. It's about people hating. So I was like pumped about the day, and so like we didn't sell them first thing in the morning. So um, we don't do the same thing every week, but I would refer people to the video that we posted on YouTube. Called If you search for Rebellion Air Cover Calls, you'll see how uh, a back test of how a certain cover call strategy did in 2020, which is pretty surprising because in 2020 Tesla, it grew by 8.3 times, so 8.3x. Uh,
Yeah, that's the sort of thing you would just assume you'd get your face ripped off if you sell covered calls. And to be fair, there's a couple of weeks where you would get your face ripped off. But with
mhm.
the thing with covered calls is all about consistency. But I would even say it's beyond that. Like it can be so emotional, especially if you're doing it
Mhm.
yourself. I mean, I was doing it on my own for a good while. Then I stopped. But like it's so stressful to like watch the movements throughout the day and to like just know that like you can't be anywhere Friday afternoon because you might have to like close. So just logistically, I get why people don't want to do it because it is a lot of work and a lot of stress and anxiety. But I've been really happy with the way that it's worked out for our clients, and that we haven't done everything perfect, but it's been, I think it's fair to say that it's been a big value add. Maybe not a big value add, that might be a stretch, but it's been a value add.
Mhm.
It's the sort of thing like if you want covered calls to be a big value add, and I think we do have a lot of people that have this misconception, like,
Yeah,
oh, I've got like 2,000 shares, and I want like a few $1,000s of income each month, but I also don't want to lose any of
every
my
week.
Tesla shares. Yeah, yeah, and it's
Every
like, listen, we can go with like a yield maximizing strategy, but you are going to lose some shares and you're almost certainly going to underperform just to buy and hold.
Yeah,
What we think it makes sense for is it's just like a little bit of alpha relative to just owning the stock. So you want to, the main reason we own Tesla stock is not to get like a 5% dividend yield, right? Like
yeah,
what we're actually after is the kind of upside from Optimus and from robotaxis. So like job number one in my mind is to protect that upside, and then if you can make a little on top of that and increase your share count over time, then absolutely. And that's what we think covered calls make sense for. So
yeah.
you don't want to get too
I don't.
excited about covered calls because they're
Yeah,
not that exciting. They're not that interesting, to be honest. I think if you're doing them right, they're not.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. We use a margin of safety, so it's not as potentially juicy as flying closer to the sun. So we're not the people that are flying close to the sun.
yeah.
So let's talk about a little bit about Figures Robot. I don't know if you saw this. They posted a video. I was actually impressed by this. So they claim they used something like Isaac Sim, which is NVIDIA's training, where they train in a simulated world with physics, and they did that to train the robot in a shorter period of time to essentially walk faster. So they unlock the gate of the robot while keeping its balance. So I was pretty impressed by that. So it's a increased stride length. I didn't quite measure it on like the tempo of the steps, but I was impressed by that. So I would expect Tesla to do something similar, but maybe not use the simulated data approach.
The thing I don't understand with Figure, like they've clearly got an impressive product. I think the bot itself, can do a lot of great stuff. A lot of the demos have been pretty impressive, and especially like when you take into consideration the fact that they just went to open source models and are doing it on their own essentially. They're not doing this partnership with OpenAI anymore. you can look at that and say, wow, that is actually like really impressive. Like there was the one demo I saw maybe a week or two ago where it's like, hey, where do you like put all these groceries away, and you've never seen them, and like, you know, they work as a team, and they put them in the right way, and it's like, okay, it's clear to see how this could be economically useful. But I think so many jobs are not the type of thing like that you can kind of train generically. It's okay, I'm in the factory, and like for this particular job, like, you know, you do this one thing, and you're not going to train like a million robots to train on this one particular job on the line. So it seems to me like if you look at how much effort Tesla has put into training on FSD, I think it stands to reason it's going to be like an order of magnitude or more like video training that's going to be needed to make humanoid robots work at a variety of different tasks. And so I just don't understand how Figure or some of these other companies are going to make it without an AI partner that's got a lot of compute, because like I just don't think you can open source that. Like, you know, you can use a good model that can like get you 80% of the way there to some like reasonably good tasks, and maybe if you're just in the house and like folding some laundry, you can do some stuff in a market that's big enough. But I just don't think they'll be as efficient with their movements or as fast or as capable of doing a variety of jobs if they don't have that training infrastructure. So that's my biggest question mark for them. But I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, you still need the compute and all that, but what you and I know, and we visited a different humanoid robot startup, is that the more variety of tasks that you show the robot, the fewer repetitions you need to train it on. So if you are training it with data that's captured, you don't need as many repetitions to get it to learn that, because you have like that base model that it can work off of. And we also saw this with Tesla's China release for full self-driving, where they already had the base model from the US, and then they added the simulated data from the Chinese videos over the internet. So like maybe once you have this real world data, it becomes a lot easier to add simulated data and get it to work. And then you can
Yeah.
even take like the real data that you just created, and like it's like
Do different variations of it, like in different weather and in different lighting. And
yeah, but you could take like, Figure now has this walking data, because the robot's now walking with this gait. They can use that as real world data now. So you can enhance the simulated data with that possibly. I'm not an AI person, but I'm just guessing with that last piece. So maybe we should talk about Kathy Wood's
Well,
8 trillion.
since we're on the topic of Optimus, maybe we can talk about the
Yeah.
this roadshow they're basically doing in DC. Mr.
Yeah.
Optimus goes to Washington, as you said. I was kind of surprised by that. It seems that they're probably doing that in order to lay the groundwork for some legislation or something. But I'm kind of curious, what do you think Tesla needs from regulators or from lawmakers in Washington that they would be even doing a trip like this? And maybe for those who hadn't seen the news, they're going to bring a bunch of Optimuses. What's the plural? Optimi to Congress. They're going to let all the staffers, interact with them, see them, answer questions. So seems like a pretty concerted effort to, get the lawmakers familiar with the technology. Pretty cool, I think. But I'm wondering, like, usually when you've got some big effort like this, it's because you need some kind of framework, or you at least want legislators thinking about, what laws might need to be removed. So what do you think? Is there an angle here that I just haven't thought of yet?
I want to take you back to the Wii robot event. So
I didn't get an invite. I blocked it out.
So one of my big takeaways from that was that Tesla should take the show on the road. That Tesla should run events where people can buy tickets and be able to meet the Optimi and various situations, whether it's um, out in an area where they can interact that way, or get drinks or food from the robot. And I thought it would be good to do that so they could just get more real training. So people ask weird questions that maybe your engineers at Tesla wouldn't think of, and they react in different ways. So you're getting more reactions like that. I think it would Tesla bringing it to Washington D.C. I think is a great way to gain exposure. Certainly, there's going to be people who hate it. So, like, I'm guessing every politician that's for the common worker
I
might be.
was just imagining Bernie Sanders with that, that meme of him like sitting in the chair with his gloves.
Yeah, the gloves. Yeah.
You're trying to disenfranchise the American worker.
Mm-hmm. I don't think Trump will come out against Optimus. He's for blue collar America, but I do think possibly a good portion of others will be against it, and maybe they'll try to mess Optimus up. One thing that really impressed me about the We Robot event is that there were about 20 Optimi that were out and about, and only once did one fall down. So allegedly, someone's handbag caught on one of the arms, um, and the Optimi ended up falling over. So Tesla needs to do the whole like hand mess with the robot with the handbag, and not just like punch it or kick it.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's clearly no shortage of training, but like that almost goes back to my point about Figure and other companies who don't have like some training, some databases. Like, there's just so many the degrees of freedom that a humanoid robot has, and the types of environment that they can encounter. It's so much more than anything that FSD has to deal with. And so I just can't imagine a scenario where you don't need table stakes, like minimum what Tesla has today in terms of compute in order to do a real humanoid robot. And it seems logical to me that you'd need like 10 times or more that amount of compute. So I don't know. I'm just kind of skeptical of anyone who's not either developing their own or has a partnership that has access to a significant amount of training compute for all these random types of situations that you're going to have.
You raise a good point. A lot of the videos we see from humanoid robot makers are one take.
Yeah.
So like the most impressive stuff is one take. We have seen the digit robot, stack boxes all day at various conferences. I actually don't think it's that impressive. It's really slow. Credit to them, because I don't have a working humanoid robot. But
what have you done with your life? You don't even have a humanoid robot yet.
It's not that impressive to me. But what Tesla did at We Robot, I think it's very impressive to be in front of a bunch of people, and if they can do it in a safe way, I think that'll be really important for lawmakers to see that. Though there's going to be people with preconceived headlines or pre-written headlines that are going to decide that it's just a bad thing.
I was just about to say, like, what's the CNN headline about this? Like, I can almost see in my mind the CNN headline of something about how, like Elon tries to lobby politicians to like give himself whatever a monopoly in humanoid robot market, like killing all human labor in the US or something like that. Not killing, but and then there's like the Babylon Bee headline. It's like Elon introduces senators to their future replacement or something like that.
So now that you mentioned that, we do have some Congress people that are very old. So maybe
quite
some
a lot
of
of
them,
those, don't we?
maybe some of them who aren't fans of Elon or Tesla purposely stumble into the robot and then blame the robot for making them fall or something.
I don't know. I don't think they would go so far as to physically. Maybe they would, but to me, it'd make more sense for a staffer to do that than one of the actual senators. Plus, I'd be worried that like Mitch McConnell might actually hurt himself if he tries to do that.
All right, so let's talk about Kathy Wood's $8 trillion valuation for Tesla, effectively like $2,000 a share by what 2030 or
2030, I
something.
think it is, right? Yeah.
So she just did a video with Larry Goldberg on Farzad's channel. It was I think the full video was over an hour and 15 minutes. And part of it, they talked about that valuation. What are your thoughts on that, Matt?
Yeah, I think it's actually pretty reasonable. I mean, we've published our own valuation about 2 years ago now, coming to pretty similar conclusions as long as you are giving some credit for Optimus and for FSD, robotaxis in particular. So I think it sounds crazy, and I think people are gonna point out to the fact that she had some. I don't know what her 2020 price target for Tesla in 2025 was, but I'm pretty sure they didn't get close to that. And so it's gonna be very easy to just say, oh look, like Kathy's always talking up her book and coming up with these crazy numbers that don't make any sense. And like, admittedly, $8 trillion just sounds bananas. But this is something I've had a couple conversations with James Dauma about, and he's like mentioned it too. Like, the numbers you get are just nutty when you start looking at this just from a first principles basis, and like taking everything into account, not just assuming they sell as many as they can at the highest possible point. Like, it has to make sense for the consumer too. And so like looking at the TAM and looking at like the prices decreasing over time, both for Optimus and for Tesla and for the robotaxi. But like when you start doing that, you're like, oh my gosh, they're going to be printing money if this actually works the way that they say that it will. And so when we don't just assume that because the output of your valuation model or your earnings model or whatever is crazy, if you actually say, all right, well, what if this is true? What does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
Then yeah, you can get to an $8 trillion and eventually 10, 20, what did Elon say, like 29 trillion in the out years. There was some number when he was looking at the Optimus valuation of like essentially having significant portion of the entire global workforce, it'd be a humanoid robot and doing so at great economics. And at that point, it's like services are plentiful and, there's deflationary pressure. So you've got like higher GDP and lower prices. Like, what is even the economy at that point? That was Elon's point. And I think when you think about this from first principles, that's the kind of area that you land at. And so I think it's hard.
I think Matt, even our crazy Optimus valuation. So like once Optimus starts, essentially we value it potentially at $3,400 a share. So I think it's like 34.15, just the Optimus piece, like nothing else. And I may be disremembering, but I think the valuation of the Optimus piece in like 2034 was something like 26 trillion.
Yeah, it was in that neighborhood.
Yeah. And this was before Elon talked about this at like the annual shareholders meeting. So I think it's reasonable. I will give ARK some credit. So they were right and they were wrong. So their price target was about 3,500, if I remember right. So if you take 3,500 and divide by 15,
split adjust.
Yeah, split adjust it. Essentially, you get like $233 a share.
Wow. Okay, I take it back.
Yeah, so they were very accurate with the share price, but the really uncomfortable place where they're wrong is they assume Tesla's business would be much further along with how many cars they would be making, and how far along Robotaxi would be at this point. So They got some stuff right, they got some wrong. Um, our valuation, if we're going off our 2023 valuation, we valued the car business at around $350 a share to 380, and Robotaxi at like 1100 a share without Tesla licensing it to other players. So combined, that would be $1,500, and that's like a what it'd be worth today if people valued it, correctly. And then that didn't include Tesla bot. So like if Tesla bot was on its way and Tesla was heavy in that space, if they were a scaled player in that space, and we can see it far exceeding, well, I don't know, 20, 30, 2000 a share.
So what happened to ARC is definitely what happened to us too, though, where we definitely assumed Tesla would be further along, than they are right now. I mean, if you told me back then, or even more so in 2021, that Tesla in 2025 still might not break 2 million units, I'd be like, oh my gosh, maybe I got this thesis wrong. Like, this is like, it's actually kind of shocking to me how much they've struggled to get volume out there. Now, I think a big part of the reason for that is what we were talking about earlier, where they just have done nothing to increase awareness of, the vast majority of the car buying market. I think that is starting to
Compact would be out by now too.
Yeah, I thought Compact would be out by now. Like, and this might be an uncomfortable topic. I haven't even brought this up with you, but like, is Cybertruck a flop? I mean, they're not doing 10,000 a quarter, I don't think, and I would struggle to see them doing much more than that. So for all the time and effort that went into designing another car that is frankly just selling like roughly at Model S and X levels, was that a wasted endeavor? Now, they certainly got some technology, 48 volt and steer by wire and other things like that are helpful, vehicle to grid, that are like helpful things to have gone through the technical, know-how of doing. But to me, as I'm just thinking about how much effort went into that for not really increasing the TAM too much, I'm wondering if that was even a good use of time for the next major product that they launched.
I don't think Cybertruck's a flop. I think 4680 until now is a flop. And they up until now, they still haven't figured it out. Maybe incrementally internally, they something has changed, but they've had big issues making the 4680 battery, which is essentially necessary for the Cybertruck. Granted, Tesla can put whatever batteries they want in a Cybertruck, but they're not doing that as far as we know. They could put
they're not supply constrained right now. I mean, you can get a new Cybertruck, today if you want to, essentially. So like, is your point that if they figure out 4680, they'll be able to lower the price and that'll increase the demand?
Yeah. That if they figure out and scale 4680, that they would lower the price and begin to pump more out. But right now, because it's not 4680 hasn't been working that great, they're keeping it at a lower pace.
Yeah, I can see, even if they do figure that out, and I don't know, let's say they get it to $60,000 price point or something like that. I still would struggle to see them selling much more than 25,000 a year or something like that. And so it still just seems to be a product that is not likely to move the needle too much on, to overall deliveries and volumes. But maybe that's okay because it's just they're developing this technology that's going to go into all these other products down the road. To me, just as the more I was kind of reflecting on that, it just seems like it maybe was not necessarily the right order of operations in terms of trying to, get out to the masses. Like, that is not a truck that's going to appeal to the masses for sure.
I think Tesla's going to eat up the luxury truck market. And so I think the ceiling is much higher than 25,000 a year. If all they grab is like the luxury truck market.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see. I'm skeptical.
Maybe if they don't offer one around 50,000, then like a single motor one, then maybe they're not able to do 250,000.
Yeah. There's an interesting comment I'm gonna click on here. So, the insane modeling for Optimus is the same as when all those Tesla bulls modeled vehicle sales at 20 million annually by 2030. Um, I would agree with that actually to a small extent. That you can't just take what Elon says and model that out as fact. So when I was modeling out, 2030, I think the number I was using back in 2020 was the 12 million. So I assumed a very steep haircut from what Elon said they were going to do. And when you're going through a modeling exercise like this, it's important to look at a couple different scenarios. So we looked at like a base, a bear, and a bull case. But like this is a product unlike anything else. And so like, while we say we've got insane numbers and it seems wild and nutty, as James Dalma said, like just because the answer is nutty, like that's why most people are actually going to agree with that commenter that like,
Yeah.
no, like that's never happened before. That won't happen.
Mhm.
We are entering the age of AI. Like this is not like the internet. This is not like the industrial revolution. It's a completely different thing, where you are significantly increasing knowledge, and the way that almost all value in society is made is on knowledge. And so if you can, in a very short period of time, significantly increase the knowledge capability of all the humans, and then eventually you get smarter than the smartest human, and then as Elon has said, eventually you get like artificial intelligence that is smarter than the collective intelligence of humanity. Like, yeah, you can get some pretty nutty numbers in an assumption like that. If there's just new materials that are being built that can do all sorts of stuff, and you can figure out how to like continuously optimize manufacturing processes, and all that's done in an automated way, in an agentic way, like that just creates insane numbers. And so you don't want to just say that will happen, and so you like go and YOLO into deep out of the money call options or anything like that. Like there's a huge amount of execution risk. There's like, a lot of stuff that needs to go right. But the point is like, you can use your imagination and first principles thinking to say, yeah, like this could work out that way. And I think that's where, my head is on this. Like, and I've been rambling for a little while, but I want to just like one last point to kind of wrap it up. I was able to envision like robo-taxis for a very long time, but I never baked that into my model until about a month ago. I modeled it out as an upside scenario that, hey, if they figure this out, here's the valuation impact of it. But if they don't, here's, just what the value is on, FSD as a good ADAS system that maybe has a higher take rate over time. Great. So I think with Optimus and those crazy things, that's where we are right now, where you can come up with a model that is definitely going to be wrong, but gives you directionally an indication of where the value might be. And then as it becomes clear that, the Optimus actually works and creates value and has very significant demand and has good gross margins, then you can, bake that into your base case valuation. And, by that point, if all those things are true, it's hard to imagine that Tesla wouldn't be significantly higher in valuation by that point. So I think it's a lot of people just assume because you've got crazy numbers that you're just like this dreamer bull, but like, no, you can actually have a base case scenario that doesn't assume the crazy things, but also, take a look into the future saying, what do those crazy things actually look like when you do a discounted cash flow on it? So that's my valuation rant for now.
All right. Since we last talked, Matt, I think Tesla got its California approval. California approval.
California love.
And it was with the CPUC in order to be able to offer supervised rides on a pre-arranged basis, I believe, with Tesla employees. So it's one of four that's kind of like on this path toward them offering driverless in California. So there's two key approvals they would need with the DMV, or the Department of Motor Vehicles in California. There's another one that they would need with CPUC to be able to charge for driverless in California. So this is a necessary first step for Tesla to do it. Also, interestingly enough, I don't believe they yet have to file a paper report every time there's a disengagement with disapproval. So that's just
Wow.
something goofy about California.
Small wins. As crazy as like all this regulation is, I mean, it kind of pales in comparison to. So a case was on last week talking about the regulatory approval in Europe and just how insane it is. Like they've got these well-intended bureaucrats that are making rules like, if you have your blinker on for 5 seconds because you're trying to merge and it just isn't safe yet, even if it is safe and you're starting to merge, that 5 second timer is just going to click in and you have to like re-merge back into the lane that you're coming from, which is just so dangerous and stupid.
Mm.
As Case had pointed out at that time. And that was just one of many examples of like, regulators trying to do something good, but just completely neutering this life-saving technology and like slowing its development, slowing its deployment. And like, this is going to sound hyperbolic, but I'm almost certain that this has actually cost lives in Europe of people who would have been driving on FSD, and got into an accident that, killed somebody, that maybe that wouldn't have happened if FSD was actually allowed. So I'm very thankful for the regulatory structure we have here, even in California. When I look at some of the other stuff going on in the rest of the world and how restrictive it is.
Yeah. Tesla FSD saved me from road rage yesterday. I was in the roundabout and I was crossing and someone entered the roundabout like right in front of my car. So they didn't even look, which was
Jeez.
crazy. They just followed the person in front of them. And Tesla FSD doesn't care, and it's pretty chill like that. I think a good note to end it would be showing this website called teslastocksense.com, and pretty fire website. Go check it out. Open a new tab. Check it out. It shows Tesla's stock performance since various dates, various events. One of the fun ones was when Jim Cramer, when Tesla IPO'd, he suggested that Tesla didn't have a business plan that works or something like that. Basically called them a failed business before the IPO. That was pretty sweet. So check that out. That was made by one of our content creators that we support on X. So Rebellion Error. We support a bunch of different content creators. I've supported many of them throughout the years. So has Matt. But on X, we support people by giving them this badge that gives them increased reach, or X says it does. And that shows that they're a content creator. We get value from at least some of their content. We don't necessarily agree with all the people that we have as a Rebellionaire content creator, and it doesn't mean that they're a client or that they endorse us whatsoever. So that's what that's about.
Yeah. So on that website, I mean, I think the thing that really it was created out of recently was the Tim Walz comment. So maybe we should touch on that. I think everyone's aware of it, but
Yeah.
I mean, how crazy is it that he, his line was 225 and dropping, and like how much joy he got from that. And I saw just a moment ago we crossed 290. So like that is one of the most excellent bottom indicators I think I've ever seen. Not that we couldn't possibly go lower from here, like on bad deliveries or bad earnings. That's definitely possible. But man, that as a bottom indicator was like just hilarious. And then the fact that he tried to backtrack it and say, "Oh, I was just joking," obviously, like that was some epic gaslighting. I've got to say. To claim that he was just joking when it was like, if you go back and watch that clip, he was not like, people were like applauding. They're like, yeah, like,
Yeah.
I feel good when Elon loses money. Like
Yeah,
that
they
was,
were dunking on Tesla and Tesla stock for it going down. Yeah.
yeah, I had no idea that so many Minnesotans had it in their pension plan, or it was in his pension plan. That for every bit of pain that he causes Elon, which by the way, Elon doesn't really care about that. The volatility he's endured has been like insane. But who does actually care and get hurt is, all the, middle class folk who have it in their 401k, who have it as part of their overall exposure because they're in the S&P 500 and they just, are index investing. Or people who, just like you and I have invested in it and have our worth tied to it. So he's like cheering on people losing money. That was one of the saddest moments for a politician to be cheering that I can recall. So I'm kind of happy about how quickly that's reversed.
He's trying to launch a career as a comedian, but he face planted.
Like one of those movies that's like a comedy, but it's like you're laughing not for the reasons that the producer of the movie thought, just because it's so poorly produced. I feel like that's what's going on with him right now. He's a knucklehead.
Elon is a great founder, and we're actually very lucky to have Elon spread his wings beyond just Tesla and SpaceX. So his impact is felt by many other companies, but now he's doing his work at Doge. There's a great thinker named Samo Berja, and he has essays about something called the Great Founder Theory. So I highly recommend that at your favorite large language model, you have it do a detailed explainer on the Great Founder Theory. And essentially what it posits is that it's a founder or a group of founders that end up moving society forward. So if you look back at like the founding fathers of America, you had all these great founders that coalesced into creating our system of government, our Constitution, the branches of government. They didn't just like take what England was doing and evolve from it. They proposed a radical new system of government. So Elon, he has different technologies that he brings. He's great at assembling teams and thinking with first principles. He's not afraid to scrap something if it's not working and kind of build it back up. Zero-based budgeting. Not all these ideas are brand new, but Elon does a really good job at implementing them in a fearless way. So I think we should champion Elon.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even with this Doge thing, I think it was the Ted Cruz podcast that he had recently, where he's like we've tried government efficiency before, where you get committees and you like talk to all the different departments and try to figure out where the waste is. And you had this idea, which was so simple. It's just like, just get me into the payment system. Let's see where the money's going. And like, that is a way faster way of doing it. But it's like a lot of the things Elon says and does are so obvious once he's done them and said them. I've had that light bulb moment so many times when I just like hear the way that he does a particular like style of management, or like when he described vision for me, like the vision only approach to autonomy instead of like LiDAR, and like he's literally talking about the difference in like the nanometers of the wavelength and everything. And like once I could kind of like process what he was actually saying, I was like, oh my gosh, he is absolutely right. Like LiDAR is a crutch. But he's got so many of these insights that are so simple, but still so hard. Like I think a lot of times it's like the simplest approach, the simplest wisdom is the easiest to kind of overlook. And I think he is extremely good at kind of simplifying and going down to like the most basic first principles. So yeah, we are very fortunate to have him. And just the way that he thinks about things is, first principles is like a phrase that gets thrown around way too often. And I think a lot of people like say first principles, but they don't actually do it or really know what it means in a deep way. But when you actually do that and understand it and can see some examples, it's extremely powerful.
And I'd say one of the fundamentals that drives Matt and I is like going to the source and really deep diving on people. So there was a great interview that All In did with Howard Lutnick. I highly recommend people watch at least like the first 45 to 50 minutes of that. Howard tells several great stories about forming the Trump transition team, working with Trump, recruiting Elon to Doge, naming Doge, and some other things. Howard's a great promoter and people person. That was really helpful in understanding him, but he's also a big time nerd. He talked about how deep he goes on his research. So before Trump came out with the whole thing about the Panama Canal, Howard did some deep research, did some nerdy like investigative work that reminded me of like when I went to Lathrop to count megapacks. So they actually put a camera on one of the ocean going vessels that went from one end of the Panama Canal to the other. And they studied certain things about that. I won't spoil what that is, so you can watch it. Also, there was an interview about Besant, the Treasury Secretary, who actually worked for George Soros at one point, but he was on the team that broke the back of the Bank of England in 1982 or something like that. So it's his understanding of economies and central banks is might be unmatched. He's up there. He's in elite status.
Yeah, I actually had no idea that he was on that team, and like that's one of those stories as like a finance professional. It's like one of the most epic stories ever, and it's like, you know, say what you want about George Soros now, that was like a baller move that they did, and it was like just so impressive. And so to hear that like that's the caliber of people that's you know, working in the cabinet right now, it's just very impressive.
They talked about how they assembled the cabinet, but also provided uh, a good understanding of how Trump can be. And you know, contrary to how many people may think, Trump does lean on people around him. Trump wants more people in the room. He doesn't just do one-on-ones with Howard or with Elon. He has a bunch of people in the room when he's thinking about things, making decisions, and steering things. So I thought that was helpful. I'd encourage people to always go directly to the source and not rely on headlines or the media's interpretation or spin on things.
Yeah.
No
Yeah,
matter who the
absolutely.
media is,
No,
whether
I,
it's
well, I
media
mean, I
that
don't.
you like or you don't like, go
I
to
mean,
the
one of the
source.
most shocking revelations I had is like I had a very negative perspective of Jared Kushner. It's just like, oh, you're giving like your son-in-law like a job, and like, he's got no experience in it, and it's just like, come on, Trump, like that's just a bad look. And I just assumed he was like an idiot. And then you hear him on Lex Friedman give this extremely thoughtful interview for 4 hours or whatever it was, and actually talk about the accomplishments that they had. And I was like, wow, I had no idea, because the media doesn't, you know, give things a fair shake.
Mhm.
And I came away super impressed with him and the approach that they took. And frankly, like Trump's decision to put him in that position, because Trump took all sorts of hate for that. But like, I don't think you can reasonably argue that it was not an excellent pick at that time, given everything that they accomplished. And so, yeah, just to reiterate and underscore what you just said, Bradford, go to the source and don't read the headlines, and don't take our word for it either. Just go to the
Yeah,
source.
that's true. Yeah. We may not be able to produce all the information you need. We're not librarians are, but luckily we do have a couple librarians on staff that
Yeah,
can
we
help.
do.
With that, I'm going to say bye for now. See us next week, 4 o'clock Tuesday.
Eastern, 4 Eastern.
Be there.